protesters. Private jets at the Al Banin military airport were seen grounded. Military personnel say they have joined the People's Revolution. If true, the takeover is a major blow to Gaddafi's regime. With more on the opposition's growing area of control, Jackie Rowland reports from Benghazi.
The town of AlJazeera lies just 50 kilometers to the west of Tripoli. Now it has become a new front line in the battle between pro- and anti-Gaddafi forces. These pictures were shot by journalists brought here by the regime. The idea was to show the outside world that Gaddafi is still in control here. Instead, the reporters found that AlJazeera was in rebel hands, at least for now. The town is surrounded by pro-Gaddafi forces. Both sides are armed with tanks and anti-aircraft guns. Gaddafi's crackdown against his opponents has been the bloodiest and most ruthless in the wave of uprisings sweeping North Africa and the Middle East. But it doesn't seem to have stemmed the rebellion against his 4-decade rule. In the east of the country, opposition forces are welcoming visitors to what they are calling Free Libya. In the city of Benghazi, there are signs of a return to normal. Banks have reopened here and in the town of Al-Baida, both of which threw off Gaddafi's rule about a week ago.
The banks have been closed for 8 days, but thanks to our brave young men, they've managed to reopen in an orderly fashion. And praise be to God, everything is moving along smoothly.
And while residents stock up at the supermarket, the power vacuum that was left in the city is being filled. Local committees that are running towns and cities in the east of Libya have rallied behind a new leader, the former justice minister who resigned over the brutal repression.
What is happening in Libya is a popular revolution led by the youth, supported by the people against oppression and against a dictator who has led Libya with a singular point of view and with a vengeful attitude and bloodthirsty soul. Now we announce to the world that we intend to build a democratic nation with institutions that respect international obligations and treaties.
Libya relies on its oil fields. They're the mainstay of its economy. But now production appears to be grinding to a halt. This refinery is pumping 11,000 barrels a day, only 1/10 of what it would normally produce, according to the manager. The expatriate workers who used to man the plant have fled to escape the violence. Muammar Gaddafi's options are shrinking. Opposition forces continue to advance towards the capital, and the international community has imposed sanctions which further limit his room for manoeuvre. But the Libyan leader still shows no sign of being in the mood to surrender. Jackie Rowland, Al Jazeera, Benghazi.
The US Secretary of State is in Geneva ahead of a UN Human Rights Council meeting on Libya. Hillary Clinton arrived in Switzerland late on Sunday. The United States has been vocal in its condemnation of Gaddafi's regime, calling on the Libyan leader to respect his people's wishes and leave now. Tunisia has a new Prime Minister, Al-Beji Qaid al-Sebsi. He succeeds Mohamed Ghannouchi, who resigned on Sunday. There had been renewed street violence in the capital Tunis prior to his departure. Nadim Baba reports.
A surprise announcement as Tunisia's interim president names a new prime minister.
At this critical moment, in order to maintain our national interest and to ensure that the state is up and running with all its institutions, I requested Mr. Beji Qaid al-Sebsi to assume the office of Prime Minister, and he thankfully accepted this responsibility.
Al-Beji Qaid al-Sebsi is 84 and a former foreign minister. He served under Tunisia's post-independence leader Habib Bourguiba and under President Zine al-Abidine Ben Ali. His appointment came hours after interim Premier Mohamed Ghannouchi unexpectedly stepped down.
I am not prepared to be the person who takes decisions which result in the loss of life.
The move comes at a tense time for Tunisia. Sunday saw new clashes on the streets of the capital. Officials say at least 5 people have died during street protests since Friday. Mohamed Ghannouchi took over as premier on the 14th of January after President Ben Ali fled to Saudi Arabia following weeks of protests. Critics say that since the Jasmine Revolution, there's not been real reform, and Ghannouchi's replacement is unlikely to change that.
He's out of touch, he's out of time, he's belonging other generation. What the Tunisian youth need today, who someone will be able to represent them, who someone will be able to respond to their legitimate demands.
Mohamed Ghannouchi has repeated the government's pledge to hold elections by mid-July. But almost 200 people have been arrested over the weekend. It's not clear how far the new Prime Minister can quell the anger on the streets. Nadeem Barber, Al Jazeera.
Well, with the unrest in Libya, the US and Iran briefly found themselves in agreement condemning Gaddafi's actions. Presidents Ahmadinejad and Obama both said killing his own citizens was unacceptable. But now the US has hit out at Iran, saying the United States and the world will continue to bear witness to the Iranian government's blatant violation of the universal rights of its citizens and its ongoing hypocrisy. Iranians deserve the same justice and rights that their government extols the virtue of abroad. Meanwhile, 2 Iranian opposition leaders under unofficial house arrest since February have reportedly been abducted. The human rights group says Mehdi Karoubi and 2009 presidential candidate Mir Hossein Mousavi are in grave danger. In Oman, at least 2 people have been killed in clashes between protesters and security forces. 8 others were injured. Police used tear gas to disperse the demonstrators. 2,000 people had gathered in the country's industrial center of Sohar to demand political reforms. Oman's ruler quickly offered a new jobs plan in response to the protests. Sultan Qaboos bin Said ordered the government to find jobs for 50,000 people. He will also give every job seeker around $400 a month until they find work. Qaboos will also consider giving more power to the popularly elected Advisory Council. Earlier, I spoke to Jackie Spinner. She's a journalist in Oman and was in Sohar when the clashes took place.
It's gotten a little quiet after the sun has gone down, and what we understand is that a delegation from the government has arrived in Sohar to try to meet with organizers and discuss their demands. But, you know, the situation was very tense throughout most of the day today. It morphed from a demonstration, which is what it started out yesterday, into a riot. Serious clashes between the police and the demonstrators this afternoon.
And tell us more about the demonstrators' demands and the government response to them. They're after jobs, better salaries, and end to corruption?
Yes, that's correct. Many of the university students in Sohar are concerned that when they graduate, they don't have jobs. Even though there are companies in Sohar who are in a position to hire them, they don't think that they're getting enough work. And so that's where a lot of that discontent stems from. Like some of the other countries, a few of the other countries in the region, nobody in Oman is calling for a regime change. Everyone is very satisfied with the Sultan here, but they are concerned about some of the ministers, and they're concerned about jobs and inflation and economic issues that are keeping a lot of people down.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the loyalty to Sultan Qaboos. He has made some announcements, hasn't he, about an increase in monthly allowances for students. Has that gone down well or not had an effect?
Well, it was just announced this morning, so I don't know if many of the protesters in Sohar even had time to digest that news. But he has been very responsive. There was a big demonstration in the capital here in Muscat last week, and immediately following that, he announced some of the concessions. So he appears to most Omanis to be dealing with this situation in a very proactive way.
Yemen's President Ali Abdullah Saleh has addressed a meeting of his army generals as he tries to shore up his grip on power. The country has been racked by weeks of pro- and anti-government protests. Saleh vowed to defend the unity of Yemen to the last drop of blood. Hashim Al-Habara reports from the capital, Sana'a.
Remaining defiant, President Saleh telling his army officers that Yemen is in danger of disintegration and that they should fight for its unity.
We have vowed to defend the republican system, the unity and safety of the republic till the last drop of our blood, and this vow stands now. There is an attempt to split the country into north and south.
The president was referring to his arch rivals, secessionists asking the south to break away from the north, and the Houthi rebels in their ongoing battle against the government for greater autonomy in their region.
This isn't the first time that the president has met his army generals since the start of the crisis in the country. But his statements tell a great deal about his confusion, and it's clear that he has been inspired by Gaddafi's speeches.
But thousands of young Yemenis who have taken to the streets across the country have totally different demands: the departure of the regime. demands waved off by Saleh's ruling party as illegitimate.
It won't be an Egyptian-style change. It won't be a Tunisian type of change. But unfortunately, if it goes to become very close to what's happening now in Libya, then I don't by any means rule out the possibility of an international and regional intervention here.
For these protesters, the movement has come a long way, inspired many Yemenis and made sacrifices that calls for dialogue by the government are too late. But if the president is determined to cling to power, the opposition and the anti-government protesters say they will muster more men here in the capital and across the country to put an end to what they describe as an autocratic regime. Hashim Al-Barra, AlJazeera, Sana'a.
As anti-government forces in Libya continue to capture more of the country, Muammar Gaddafi's options are dwindling. Coming up, we'll take a look at what parts of the country are still under the colonel's control. And plucked to safety under a shroud of secrecy, Britain moves in to rescue citizens trapped in remote parts of Libya.
Hello again. We're seeing an awful lot of wet weather across the northern parts of Asia at the moment. The heavier downpours are now moving away from the northern parts of China there. So here they'll be cloudy, just 1 or 2 showers to deal with here. Instead, here's that heavier rain making its way across the southern half of Japan. Very heavy downpours out of that. But this should clear as we head through the day on Tuesday. Then there'll still be a lot of cloud around and 1 or 2 showers, but it shouldn't be the heavy and persistent rain. Now, all of that grey weather does extend further south as well. So for the southeastern parts of China, also lots of cloud here as well. That cloud will be capable of giving us 1 or 2 showers. The heaviest of those will be here, just making their way through Shanghai there. Heavy downpours I expect, particularly during the afternoon. Now, a little bit further south, and for the southern parts of the Philippines, the wet weather here really is pepping up. An area of low pressure does appear to be developing, so very wet as we head through the next couple of days here. Elsewhere, there will also be some heavy showers, particularly across Java there. There it does look very wet, even for Jakarta as well. Now, for Australia, the wettest weather here is still in the far north. Torrentially heavy downpours out of this band of wet weather as we head through the next couple of days, so certainly it's very wet here. Further south, it should be an awful lot drier here. Warm for us in Adelaide, but cooler in Melbourne at 19.
A popular uprising that shook the country to its core. A defiant president under siege from his people. As the protesters took charge of the streets, we look back at the events that are changing Egypt.
I will stay on the air if I can until the police come
in a special program, Al Jazeera gives you a day-by-day account from those that witnessed them firsthand. Egypt burning, at this time on Al Jazeera.
Welcome back. The top stories on Al Jazeera. Fresh fighting broke out in the Tunisian capital Tunis between security forces and demonstrators. The violence comes as Mohamed Ghannouchi announced he will step down as prime minister. The United Nations has unanimously voted to impose immediate sanctions on the Libyan regime. It comes as anti-Gaddafi protesters close in on the capital, Tripoli. But the Libyan leader is defiant, saying he won't leave. But the Libyan leader still has some support just outside the capital. Gaddafi loyalists took to the streets, waving posters and chanting slogans. Outside the city of AlJazeera in western Libya, there were similar scenes. The city centre is in anti-government hands, but the protesters say pro-Gaddafi forces are preparing to launch a counter-offensive against them. The United Nations estimates that more than 1,000 civilians have been killed in the fighting in Libya so far, but the Gaddafi family denies that. Speaking to the American network ABC, Saif al-Islam, one of Gaddafi's sons, said the reporting on Libya has been unfair.
Show me a single attack, show me a single bomb, show me a single casualty. The Libyan Air Force destroyed just the ammunition sites.